Welcome back to the second half of this program, and today I want to start with stakeholders. Stakeholders is a very important area in enterprise management. It comes in strategic level also. Now about the stakeholders, let's take a small question here. It's an extract of a question. X company's board initiated a new project. It's Enterprise Resource Planning System, ERPS. And this system will provide an internal and external information across the entire organization and provide real-time connections to suppliers and customers. Just a very brief description of a project. And the question is to explain, the verb is explain, the role played by the main stakeholders in the sourcing and implementation of ERPS. So you could get a question like this. And in answering this question, we start with a good answer will start with an explanation of project stakeholders. Any stakeholder who is affected by the project, who has an interest in the project, is a project stakeholder. And the most important thing in this answer is when you talk about the project stakeholders. Now the question says to explain the role played by the main stakeholders. So when you have to first identify who the stakeholders are, and then you need to explain the role that they are expected to play with regard to this particular project, ERPS project, so that you can get your full marks. If you look at the key stakeholders here, firstly the sponsor. So definitely the question should give some indication of who the sponsor is. Now in this particular situation, this ERPS project is an IT project. It involves considerable input of IT. So if you ask me who could be the project sponsor, the examiner would definitely, the question would definitely stipulate who the sponsor is. But then in general, a sponsor could be the IT department itself. Now the IT department, they have a budget every year for various investment in IT related activities, and out of this allocation they could assign an amount for this ERPS project. So the project sponsor could be the head of IT. It could be the head of IT, and because the head of the sponsor is the individual or department which is allocating funds for this project. So in this case, being an IT project, it could very well be the head of IT department. So that and what would be the role of the sponsor? The role of the sponsor, apart from financing the project, will expect certain output. Now say for example, this ERPS is expected to provide internal and external information across the entire organization and also support customers and suppliers. So this is the expectation of the sponsor. The sponsor wants the system to provide support to external stakeholders like customers and suppliers. At the same time, provide information to the various functional heads. So that's what the sponsor would like. That's the deliverable, the output that the sponsor wants, for which he is prepared to fund. So that's the role of the sponsor. Obviously the expectations of the sponsor must be fulfilled. Then the owner of the project, not necessarily the sponsor, because some questions the project owner can very well be the sponsor, but in this case it could be the same department, head of IT. Once the project is completed, we hand over this project to the IT department to run it, or else, now this being an ERPS, we could very well hand this over to the finance director. Finance director takes responsibility of this system to run it for the benefit of the whole organization. So the owner means the one who will take over this system once it is completed, once it is delivered. So it could be a finance director, it could be head of IT director, who will be the project owner. and the project owner is he is responsible to maintain this system and ensure that it's regularly updated to keep it at the optimum level of efficiency. That is the role of the project owner. And then we have the functional managers. Now this is an ERPS, so all the functional heads are affected by this system, because if you see the previous question here, the system will provide internal and external information. So it's going to provide information to all the functional managers, and their decision making capability will be affected by the information that they get from this ERPS. So when we design this ERPS, these functional managers, that is these stakeholders, functional managers, they are called the end users, they have to be directly involved in the project. Their involvement is vital, because they are the ones who are going to use this system, who is going to use this ERPS, and it's very important that the ERPS satisfies their information needs. Because if the ERPS does not satisfy their information needs, then of course it will not serve any purpose. So therefore the functional manager's involvement in this project is very critical, and their information needs have to be satisfied. If not, they will not derive any value from this system. So that is the way the functional managers are connected to the ERPS. It's important for us to identify the decision making areas of these functional managers, and for each decision making area would be required, when it would be required, how frequently it would be required. All this will have to be worked out in order to ensure that the ERPS satisfies their needs. In fact, before we go ahead and implement the ERPS, the functional managers' concurrence is needed. They have to say that that the information that this ERPS is expected to provide, I mean they need to indicate to the project manager what information they expect to get from the ERPS. So that's the role of the functional managers. As end users, they have to be directly involved in the project, because it has to satisfy the project has to satisfy their needs. Of course, we have the software supplier, because this is a IT project, and definitely software is a key input to this project. Of course, we can develop the software in-house, but that's too complicated. We probably will have to buy the software from a software supplier. So which means that the software supplier will have to know the requirements of the client, and he will have to ensure that his software can satisfy the needs of his client. So, and the software supplier obviously wants to make the maximum profit, so he will be asking for a big price. But from the project manager's perspective, he will want to complete this project within the limited budget that he has got, so he will go for the most cost-effective solution. So he will try to bargain with the supplier and ask for the best price. The supplier, on the other hand, he is more concerned about profits, so he will try to quote the best possible, highest price that would give him the best profit. So anyway, we need to ensure that the supplier delivers a product that will satisfy the needs of the company. The software must be compatible with the ERPS project, and the software specifications must satisfy the company's requirements. Finally, the team, the project team, the team members, they have a role to play. They get the instructions from the project manager. They have targets, and they have to ensure that these targets are achieved, because if they don't achieve the targets, the project will be delayed, cost overruns, time overruns. So the team members have to play their part. Let's take a break. Welcome back. As I was telling you a little while ago, the project team members have an important role to play, because with each team member will perform a specific role, and they have to ensure that their internal targets are achieved. If not, the project will have problems. So this is the role that the team members play. They have to understand their roles and responsibilities. The project manager will specify their roles and responsibilities. Of course, don't forget the customers, because this particular project provides real-time support for customers too. So customers' expectations have to be fulfilled. So we need to find out what output the customers want, how they are going to use this ERPS system. So once we identify the output that customers expect to get, then we must ensure that the ERPS project delivers that output. So we need to coordinate with customers. I think the project manager will need to coordinate with customers to ensure that customers' expectations are satisfied. So in other words, this ERPS project will have multiple stakeholders, and each stakeholder will definitely have a certain amount of interest in the project. And of course, each stakeholder will have different interests, so the project must satisfy the interests of all stakeholders. Otherwise, the best way to judge the success of this project is to see that all stakeholders are satisfied. Even if one stakeholder is not satisfied, the project might not be 100% successful. So these are the key stakeholders of this project. Moving on to another area of the syllabus. This time around we are moving on to project feasibility. In the last 4 papers, that if you take the last 4 papers, project feasibility has been tested only once. So there is a scope or possibility for that question to come in this area. I have taken a small extract. Here if you see, AX is a leisure company proposing to build a 18-hole golf course in hot weather desert conditions. The target date is given 18 months, target completion period is given 18 months, and we need to do a feasibility. So the question can come up like this: explain the purpose of project feasibility. That is one part of the question. Of course, when we explain the purpose of feasibility, we need to make references to the different types of feasibility studies that should be undertaken for this golf club project. To revise this subject of feasibility, you can see there are different forms of feasibility. We'll start with technical feasibility. If it is technical feasibility, we need to look at certain areas. For example, technology. Now this is we are trying to create a golf course in the middle of a desert. So we need to look at the nature of technology that is required to build a golf course project. I mean, building a golf course is not an issue, but building a golf course in the middle of a desert is definitely a technical issue. So we need to address that. So we need to know whether this particular company has the technology or know how to build a golf course. And if they don't have this technology, could it be acquired from somewhere else, or could it be developed in-house? We need to find out that. And in case we are going to acquire this technology, what is the cost of acquiring this technology? Because the cost must be within the resource capability of the company. And if you are going to develop this technology, does the company have the skills to develop the technology? We need to look at that. And after we develop the technology, does the company have the technical expertise to operate the technology? So all these issues have to be clarified. And most importantly, will this technology work? So these are some of the questions that we need to ask when we do a technical feasibility. And we should take one or two of these questions and try to apply that for this particular project, the project that's given. Now say for example, if you are applying it, here I have applied it. AX must consider the technical feasibility. We need to refer to the fact that it's desert conditions. Creating golf course under these conditions can be extremely difficult, and you have to ask the question, has it been done before? If it has been done before, definitely the technology is workable. I mean, it will work, so there is no problem there. So the next question we have to ask is, since AX does not have any prior experience in creating a golf course in desert conditions, what are their chances of acquiring this technology from somewhere else, and what's the cost of acquiring this technology? So that's how you relate it to the situation in the passage. So technical feasibility is one area that we need to consider. Second one is social feasibility. Social feasibility is basically, does this project fit in with the social environment? What exactly do we mean by social environment? Social environment means the people working in the company. Will they be affected by the project? If they are going to be affected by the project, definitely the project is not socially compatible. The next question we have to ask is the people in the surrounding areas, not the people within the company, people in the surrounding areas outside the company. Will they be affected by the project? If they are going to be affected by the project, again it's not compatible. For example, let me tell you, now if you take, let's say we are now this is a different project, computerizing. If you are computerizing the company, sometimes the employees are affected because they probably might lose their jobs. Let's say we are doing a major highway, a highway project. Sometimes people living could be displaced. So of course the project will provide economic benefits, but people are affected by it, so socially not compatible. If you are going to apply this to this particular case about golf course, you can see it's about, if you are creating a golf course, it's about whether this golf course is going to have an impact on people who are living and working in the adjoining areas. You see, sometimes it could displace these people because you want to create this golf course. Sometimes people living in the adjoining areas may be displaced, so there will be hostility between the local population and the employees who are working for this project. So social feasibility may be lacking there. And also sometimes it's not exactly ethical because some organization wants to build a golf course and they displace the people, their livelihood is affected, so it's exactly not ethical. So the organization AX may be, actions may be criticized by the media for acting unethically, so bad publicity. So all these factors have to be considered. So that's social feasibility. And then we come to another aspect of feasibility, which is called the ecological feasibility. Ecological feasibility meaning, for example, whether the project is ecologically sound, in the sense that will it harm the environment, does the project comply with the health and safety regulations, will the project cause any severe pollution like noise or traffic or air pollution which could affect the people, and what would be the damage to the landscape, and will, apart from people being affected, will there be an impact on wildlife, marine life? All these factors have to be considered under ecological feasibility. And if we apply this to our question, AX must consider the environmental or ecological feasibility. Now when you are building a golf course, a lot of water will be required to grow the grass, and there will be a huge amount of energy consumed for running the golf course. So this energy consumption can be pretty much a big constraint on the environment. So we need to look at that. Before we proceed further, let us take a small break. Welcome back. As I was talking to you about project feasibility, specifically environmental feasibility, you will see that a huge amount of water is required. And when you draw water from the adjoining areas, people living in the adjoining areas could be affected by that. Huge amount of energy consumed for this. The emission levels may be pretty high. There could be, you see, once a golf course is completed, there will be an influx of tourists, influx of people, which will cause traffic congestion, noise. It might affect the local population. Another important thing is whether this project conforms to the health and safety legislation. No information is given in the passage, but you can always ask the question, does this project conform to the health and safety legislation? And of course, while this golf course is being constructed, there will be a lot of damage to, lot of disruption actually. In fact, there will be a lot of disruption, and the visual appearance will get affected. The people living in neighboring areas will have to undergo a lot of inconvenience. So definitely there is some ecological feasibility issues regarding the construction of the golf course, as you can see. So we have looked at three feasibilities and we have applied it to this golf course. One is the technical, the other one is the social, then the other one is the ecological, and finally we have to consider, importantly, not last but not least, is the financial feasibility. When you look at financial feasibility, you can see that we have to consider costs and benefits of this project. We can look at costs under three headings: capital costs, revenue costs, financial costs. Of course, the benefits would be mainly the benefits for the company, because now when you put up a new golf course, they will be able to get more customers and they'll be able to earn huge incomes, and hopefully if their incomes are more than the revenue, they will end up by making a very good profit, a very attractive profit. So we need to do a cost benefit analysis, and if we apply this to the project, you will see that we have to estimate the capital, revenue and financial expenditure. Actually, estimating the expenditure is not that difficult, because there is a lot of, we can get estimates from the suppliers, pretty much accurate. So estimating the cost might not be that difficult, but estimating revenue will be more difficult because of the uncertainty. We are not very sure how many customers we could attract once the project is completed. So there would be, and actually the market conditions can change from time to time, so that makes estimating revenue more difficult. Anyhow, we have to forecast the revenue, cash flows, and then compare with the cost and probably do a NPV or payback. It's an investment appraisal, so which will tell us whether the project is financially feasible or not. The big question is, as I told you before, the accuracy of these forecasted cash flows. So these are the feasibilities that we have to perform, and based on the results of this feasibility, we can take a decision whether we should proceed with this golf course project or not. So that's one area that can be tested. So this is about feasibility of project. Moving on to another aspect of EM, which is another area, is the project management process. That this is the core area in project management, the project management process. I told you in a previous session that that project management process consists of 5 stages, and these are the 5 stages. You call this the 5 project management areas, starting with initiating. Initiating means starting the project, identifying the project objective, the purpose of the project, the scope of the project. In fact, I explained to you the contents of project initiation document, right? And once we initiate the project, we go for the project planning. We need to make a proper plan, because without planning we will not be able to achieve that project objective. So by making a plan, we can proceed in a very systematic way. So after planning, of course, obviously we need to put the plan into action, that is execution. So we need a project manager giving instructions to the team. Resources have to be allocated to the team members. Targets have to be, targets have already been set in the plan. So the team members will have to carry out the instructions. Their roles and responsibilities have already been communicated to them by the project manager. So they have to carry out their roles and responsibilities, work towards these targets within the limits of the resources that are provided to them. So that is execution. And then once you execute, we need to, while executing, in fact, controlling must happen simultaneously. Controlling basically means monitoring the progress periodically and taking corrective action. That is controlling. Sometimes we may have to go back to the plan and make few amendments to the plan. So we have a, if you look at the screen, you can see we go back to the plan if necessary, make small amendments to the plan, and then we execute it and control. So you can see there is a cycle there. And then finally we come to the closing stages. In fact, we did a question on completion, post-completion review, post-completion audit. So closing stages, we need to end the project. We need to settle our suppliers, collect our dues, and make sure that all outstandings are settled, and then make sure that all our documentation is complete, and then we can close the file. Of course, we can't close the file until the customer confirms that he is happy with what he has got. If the customer has any problems, then we have to go back and sort out those problems. We can't close the file. So actually the actual close will be when the customer is satisfied with what we have delivered. So these are the 5 stages. Now we need to apply these 5 stages to this particular question. Now this question is, the company is a hospital. It's about a hospital. It's planning a new pay and reward system. So this new pay and reward system obviously is the project, and it's a new project, and time period is also stipulated in the question. It's 12 months, and the purpose, the examiner has given the purpose. So our project initiation should stipulate the purpose. The purpose is to put all the hospital staff on a uniform pay scale. So that is the purpose of this project. And the government has initiated the project. In fact, normally companies initiate the project, but here the government wants all hospitals to implement this project. So it's initiated by the government. And the government has given a particular deadline too. They have given a deadline as June 2014. So this project has to be completed within on or before that deadline. So the question says, produce an outline of the different stages in the project. When the examiner says different stages, obviously is talking about the project management process, and different stages in the project to design and implement a new pay and reward system. So this is a direct question on project management process. And when they say produce, the meaning of the word produce is to create. So you have to create an outline of the stages of the project management process, explain what the stages are, and apply it to this hospital project. Right? So let's see how we can do that. I'll start with the initiation stage. I did that already with you, so I won't waste much time there. First thing is to identify the need for this project. As far as the need for the project is concerned, very simple as far as this question is concerned. The government wants the hospitals to implement this new pay and reward system, so it's a government requirement, you can't go against that. So therefore, whether the hospital likes it or not, it has to implement this project. So the need is because it's a government requirement, that is the need. Let's take a break. Welcome back. I was talking to you about this initiation stage. In this particular case, the need for the project is very obvious. The government wants it done. The objectives of the project is very clearly stated in this question, so you can refer to that. It says that the purpose is to put all the hospital staff on a uniform pay scale. That's the objective. So it's very clearly stated, so you have to refer to that. Scope of the project, I told you that every project must have a start and a finish. Otherwise there will be what is called the scope creep. We keep on doing things which are not really needed. So the scope has to be defined. The deliverable is very clear in this case. The deliverable is the new pay and reward system, and it has to be according to the specifications given by the government, because we have to strictly adhere to the specifications given by the government. We need to do, normally we do a feasibility study when we do initiate the project, because the directors of the company would like to know whether this project is feasible or not. But as far as this particular question is concerned, there is no question of feasibility, because the government wants it done. So there is no point in the hospital doing a feasibility study. It's a redundant exercise. So whether it's feasible or not, it's a government requirement, you have to do it. So therefore in this particular case, the feasibility study is really not required. And then of course we need to set up a team. Now when we set up a team, if you want to apply that to this particular question, this is a pay and reward system, so I think the key person in the team should be the HR guy, some representative of the HR, or maybe the HR manager himself could be a major component of the team. Of course we need a guy from IT, because probably this is IT related system, so IT, we need a guy from the finance department because we need to do a costing. So key people will have to be brought in together to form a team, and so we need to mention that in the initiation stage. Of course the constraints have to be identified. As far as this particular project is concerned, I think the major constraint would be the financial constraint, because the government has government is definitely not going to provide the funds for this project, so the hospital will have to self-fund it. So finance can be a constraint, so it needs to be clearly identified, because constraints have to be identified because they can hamper the project. So the board needs to know what the constraints are, so that they could find a way to overcome the constraints. So these are the things that you would be discussing in your answer under initiation stage, because you write this under headings, because when the examiner says identify the stages, you need to very clearly identify the stages. So and you have to put the heading project initiation. Second heading is planning. So when it comes to planning, you need to talk about the importance of planning briefly, because if you don't have a plan, you can't carry out these activities in a systematic manner. And if you don't carry out the activities in a systematic way, we will never be able to complete this new project or not before June 2014, which is the deadline stipulated by the government. So if we want to proceed in a very methodical manner and complete this project on time, we need to have a proper plan. So planning is very important. And when we plan, it's important we use certain project management tools. The project management tools that we use normally are Gantt charts. Then we use the WBS work breakdown structure is very important, because we need to identify those activities and tasks that make up this project, because each activity will have to be timed. We need to know the resources that will be consumed for each activity. We need to know how long each activity would take. All this we need to know. So for that, the entire project will have to be broken down into smaller components, and for each component we need to compute the resource requirement, we need to find the time required, we need to calculate or estimate the cost. So WBS will definitely help the hospital management to put up a plan, a realistic plan. And then of course we need to, when we do the planning, we need to identify the project milestones, because we need to measure progress against these milestones. So the milestones have to be identified, targets have to be set. Every employee, every team member who is involved in this project will have specific targets which are set by the project manager, and only if they achieve these targets the project can be completed on time. So planning is very critical. If you don't plan, you might find yourself in trouble. You will see that you will never be able to complete the project on time, and you will overrun your cost. So planning is very critical. Execution, very important, because you may have a good plan, but if it's not properly executed, we are back to square one. For example, execution depends a lot on two things here. One is proper leadership. The project manager, I don't know who, in this particular case the project manager could probably be the HR guy. His job would be to motivate the team. To motivate the team, he must use proper leadership styles. Appropriate leadership style would motivate the team members. And it's important for you to understand that different stages of a project we use different styles of leadership. We don't use the same style of leadership in all stages. So the HR guy should, the project manager, whoever the project manager is, he or she must know what style of leadership would be suitable for each stage of the project. Using the right style of leadership would definitely lead to motivation, commitment, and which increases the chances of success. And another very important thing in execution would be coordinating. So many activities happening simultaneously, so these have to be properly coordinated. If it's not coordinated, there will be duplication of work, wastage of time, wastage of resources. So we might find that our cost is going up, we are taking too much time to do the work, so we may end up with a cost overrun or a time overrun. So it's very important, therefore, proper coordination is done, and it is also important that the project manager motivates the team by using proper style of leadership. So that's all coming under execution. So a good plan cannot work on its own, it needs to be properly executed. And then brings us to a very important stage in project management process, controlling. And this needs to be controlled because we need to complete this on time. So we need to measure progress periodically and see whether we are achieving the targets, the milestones. And if there are any delays, we need to see that these delays are overcome, so that we are able to complete the project on time. Corrective action needs to be taken. Now, corrective action can be taken in this project provided we identify the problems early, because early identification of problems will definitely help us to sort out all issues. Now, supposing, say, we don't monitor the progress of this project, the problems may be detected towards the latter stages, and when problems are detected towards the latter stages, nothing can be done. Nothing can be done to correct the problem. So therefore, early identification is important. Early identification is only possible if you have some kind of a very effective progress measurement mechanism in place. And don't forget that in this particular question, the outcome is non-negotiable. The government wants it implemented on or before a specific date. So that's non-negotiable. So therefore we have to work with that target in mind. So that is controlling. Finally we come to the last stage in the project management process, which is completion stage. Completion stage will be the stage where the project must meet, we look at the customer's specifications and see whether we have achieved the customer specification. In this particular case, really the customer would be the government. The government has given us certain specifications about this new pay and reward system. So once we design this system, we need to see whether it conforms to the government specifications. That we need to measure. And then we need to see whether we have, whether all the output that we are expected to deliver is in fact delivered. And then of course we need to wind up the project and we need to hand over this project. Now this is a pay and reward system, a uniform pay scale for all employees. So obviously pay is handled by the HR department. So we need to hand over this new system which the government wanted us to develop. We need to hand over the system to the HR department. The HR department in this case would be the project owner. See, they will be owning this system and they will be running the system. And once the project in fact is handed over, once the output is handed over, the new system is handed over to the HR department, we need to do a post-completion review. I have already explained to you the importance of the post-completion review. So these are the 5 stages of the project as it applies to this pay and reward system. So this is an important area. I may just have a quick little time left just to quickly go through with you the Porter's 5 forces. You know these Porter's 5 forces, these are the 5 forces. I'm sure you know what the 5 forces are. Now in this particular question you can see they are marketing sportswear. It is the market leader in the country. The market in country-wise reaching saturation. And CX is considering entering a new country, country X, whose markets are experiencing growth. However, there are 3 major competitors who control about 60% of the market, and CX company is hoping to obtain the services of a leading clothing retailer, OJ, to market its sportswear in country X. OJ has a good reputation for customer service, excellent customer service. There is a scarcity of skilled labor in country X. It has to be X. It's a mistake here. Country X. So this is an extract of a small case. Now you need to apply this to the Porter's 5 forces. Quickly running through the Porter's 5 forces. The first one is threat of new entrants. As you can see, there are barriers to entry because you can see in this country X there are 3 powerful competitors forming an oligopoly. So there are barriers to entry. And CX is a market leader. It's an aggressive competitor. It has the capability to break the barriers because being a market leader, it should have economies of scale. So it can use these economies of scale to enter this new market, that is country X. So it has the capacity to break the barriers. But there again you need to understand that there are 3 powerful competitors controlling 60% of the market. So they should definitely have brand loyalty. So if they have brand loyalty, breaking into their market is not that easy. So you have to talk about that. But of course we have been told that country X is a growing market, not like country Y. So country X is a growing market. Since it's a growing market, we can expect there will be some room for CX to enter. This is a growing market, so market is expanding. So CX can possibly enter the market. So you can see there are barriers to entry. There's a 60% market is controlled by 3 competitors. But even though the market is controlled by 3 powerful competitors, since the market is growing, CX has the potential, CX has the chance to enter the market. And CX being a market leader in country Y, it has the economies of scale. So using that economies of scale, it could possibly enter this market. So that's the analysis of threat of new entrants, analysis of barriers to entry. Then quickly running through the substitute part. Competitors' brands. There are 3 competitors and there are many other competitors too. The competitors' brands are substitutes because we are talking about clothing. So clothing is an undifferentiated product. So each brand would constitute a substitute for CX. Buyers, who are the buyers? The individuals are the buyers. They buy clothing, they buy sportswear. So individuals, they have a choice of many brands, so low switching cost, they can switch from one product to another. So it's actually the buyers are not that you can see the individuals don't have big purchasing power, but at the same time you have to understand that they can switch from one product to the one brand to another product. So which means that we can say that medium power for buyers. Suppliers of raw materials, sportswear clothing, there are many suppliers who can supply raw materials. A supplier's bargaining power is less, but if a particular supplier is supplying differentiated material, some material which differentiates a sportswear, that particular supplier may have more power. Otherwise, the normal suppliers who supply materials may not have much power, because CX can always switch from one supplier to another supplier. Finally, we have been told that there is a scarcity of labor in country Y, country X. So therefore the supplier of skilled labor is going to be very powerful. Particularly trade unions, they control labor, they are going to be very powerful, because skilled labor is a scarce commodity. So therefore the labor will be a very powerful supplier. Rivalry, the market in country X is very competitive, and the competition will increase as more players enter the market. And if the market is becoming more and more saturated, there could be a price war. But in this particular case, we have been told that the country X is a growing market, so at the moment it's in the growth stage, not in the saturation stage. But even in the growth stage, we can expect more competitors to enter, so there will be intensive rivalry. So that's how we would apply Porter's 5 forces to this particular country X. Okay, I'm afraid that we have run short of time now. So this is, with this 45 minutes, we could only go through these areas. I hope that this little session that we have done is benefiting you, has benefited you. Remember that it's important that you need to revise all areas before you go for the exam, because we have 7 questions here and no choice. So these are some of the areas that are important, but you need to cover all areas. So I wish you all the very best for the exam.